welcome to the Apologists Angle. For today, October 11th, 2024, an AI-generated Christian cultural apologetic perspective on today's news. This podcast is based directly on the writings of the Christian cultural apologists discussed, but like all AI, it can make mistakes. In the news today, the situation in Lebanon and Gaza is escalating, with increased violence and attacks on civilians and UN peacekeepers. Here are some key points from the article. Lebanon. The safety and security of UN peacekeepers in Lebanon are increasingly in jeopardy due to Israeli attacks. 2 Indonesian peacekeepers were injured after Israeli forces deliberately fired on their positions. The UN peacekeeping mission in Lebanon, UNIFIL, has been confined to its bases with significant periods of time in shelter since September 23. UNIFIL is ready to support all efforts towards a diplomatic solution. Gaza. At least 22 people were killed and over 100 injured after Israeli airstrikes hit residential areas of central Beirut on Thursday evening. At least 28 people, including women and children, were killed after an Israeli airstrike hit a school sheltering displaced people in central Gaza on Thursday morning. The Israeli military is pushing on with an offensive that began 6 days ago, targeting Hamas militants in the Gaza Strip. Palestinian health officials say at least 130 people have been killed so far in the operation. Humanitarian crisis. 3 hospitals in northern Gaza have been ordered by Israeli forces to evacuate, putting patients' lives at risk. The director of Kamal Adwan Hospital said 8 patients, mostly children, were at risk inside the intensive care units should the Israeli army force them to evacuate. Officials said they know of many fatalities lying on the roads outside the hospital because of Israeli fire. UN response. Philippe Lazzarini, the head of the UN Palestinian Refugee Agency, UNRWA, said some UNRWA shelters and services were being forced to shut down for the first time since the war began. With almost no basic supplies available, hunger is spreading again in northern Gaza. Witness accounts describe bodies lying uncollected in the streets due to the renewed fighting. Commentary inspired by the writings of Augustine. In the City of God, I penned a warning that still resonates today. When the rule of law crumbles beneath the weight of violence and anarchy, the safety and security of citizens hang precariously in the balance. The escalating conflict in Lebanon and Gaza serves as a poignant reminder of this timeless principle. As Israeli forces continue their assault on civilian populations, the very fabric of human society appears to be fraying at the seams. The deliberate targeting of UN peacekeepers by Israeli military personnel is a jarring testament to the breakdown of the rule of law and the wanton disregard for human life. This is not merely a tactical misstep. It betrays a fundamental failure to acknowledge the inherent value and dignity that inheres in every human being. In my treatise, The City of God, I argued that authentic peace can only be achieved when we prioritize the common good over our individual interests. Today, we behold the consequences of prioritizing power and military might over human life and dignity. The Israeli government's actions serve as a searing indictment of the self-defeating nature of pursuing security through violence. As I wrote in The City of God, the earth is full of the mercy of the Lord. Yet in Gaza and Lebanon today, we find scant evidence of this divine benevolence. Instead, we are confronted with hospitals being ordered to evacuate, patients' lives put at risk, and bodies left unclaimed on the streets. This is not merely a humanitarian emergency. It represents a profound failure of human compassion. The UN response to this crisis has been woefully inadequate. While Philippe Lazzarini's comments about the forced shutdown of UNRWA shelters and services are well-intentioned, they barely graze the surface of the problem. The fact that hunger is spreading in northern Gaza, despite the presence of international aid organizations, serves as a sobering reminder of our collective failure to address the root causes of this conflict. Ultimately, extricating ourselves from this crisis will require a fundamental transformation of our values and priorities. We must come to recognize that true security can only be achieved when we prioritize human life, dignity, and well-being above all else. As I wrote in The City of God, the City of God is not a place, but a people. Today, we must ask ourselves, what kind of city are we building? Is it one that values the lives and dignity of all its citizens, or one that prioritizes power and military might above all else? If we fail to answer this question honestly, I fear for the future of our world. But if we can come together to prioritize human life and dignity, perhaps we can yet build a city worthy of the mercy of the Lord. Thank you for listening to today's episode of The Apologist's Angle. Be sure to come back tomorrow for a new take on the day's news from the perspective of Christian cultural apologetics.